Hello and welcome. My name is Thomas, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to record and edit your podcast episode. Okay, so in the previous videos, we walked through two different fundamental steps of getting up and running with a podcast. So the first thing we talked about was kind of picking out your topic and really what your podcast is going to be about and how you're going to structure it. The next video, we talked all about the gear and some of the considerations and things to keep in mind as you're going to be creating your podcast. Now, if you missed either one of those videos, I highly recommend that you go back and you check those out first, because they're going to be kind of laying a groundwork for what we're going to be talking about in this video. So below this video, I have left a link to the playlist, which is going to include all 4 videos once they're live. So you can just go through and you can just watch each of those videos in order. Also bookmark that playlist as well so that you can always come back and view any of the videos at any time whenever you need to. Okay, so but before we dive into some of the more tutorial type things that I'm going to be showing you here in a moment, I want to give you some pointers and some things to keep in mind before you hit that record button. And this is going to help a whole lot, because this has come not only from personal experience and kind of learning and evolving in my own podcast, but listening to a lot of podcasts that are both mediocre or okay and those that are really good. I've listened to, over the course of the last several years, sometimes on radio, sometimes in other mediums, I've just gotten to hear a number of professional broadcasters and what they do differently than some that are like mediocre or not that great. One of the best first pieces of advice that I could give you is to have a plan. Create what I like to call a show map. And these can be as simple as just bullet points that break down the specific topics that you're going to be talking about. I don't necessarily recommend reading from a script. Some people do that. At that point, you're looking at something that's a little bit closer to an audiobook as opposed to something that's more free form. But I've noticed this kind of extreme in the podcast world. And that is, one, you have people who are just, like I said, who are going to be reading from a script. And then you have the other extreme where people just kind of randomly riff on a topic for 45 minutes to an hour. The problem with kind of not having a plan or just kind of riffing for a long period of time is that unless you are extremely organized with your thoughts, and even if you are, a lot of times you just kind of end up with this incoherent rambling that just feels like it's more meant to fill time than it is to deliver any real value. In order for a podcast to be successful, it has to deliver some sort of tangible value for the people who are listening to it. Because contrary to popular thought and opinion, a lot of people think of a podcast as something that is free. But in reality, it's not free. It actually costs somebody something very important and significant to them, which is their time. We do not want to waste their time. So that's why when people ask, how long should my podcast be? It should be exactly as long as it needs to be to make the point you're trying to make, and not a moment longer. Okay, and the next thing that you want to do is kind of ties into the previous one, which is to make some sort of show map. And I'm going to show you one of my show maps here. And in fact, I'm going to leave a PDF download below this video where you can actually see this show map, and feel free to steal it, rip it off, use it as a basis of your own. Either way, I just want to make sure that I help you in your process of creating your own show map. But the second thing that you want to do is try to break your show up into segments, and then try to be very consistent with how you're going to treat those segments. So for example, I currently have 2 segments. I used to have 3, but I kind of cut it down into 2. And so what I do is segment 1, I kind of give a brief intro into what I'm going to be talking about throughout the course of that episode. I give people kind of a pre-shadow or a kind of foreshadow of what I'm going to be talking about, kind of give the bullet points up front of what we're going to be covering. Then what I do is I break for an ad, and then from there I go into what I like to call kind of the meat segment. That's where we really dive into everything, and that's kind of the second segment. And then I kind of have a closeout at the very end where I talk about please subscribe and things like that. Please rate and review, those kind of important things. Okay, so from there, the important thing to keep in mind is whether or not you need to consider whether or not you want to include advertising on your podcast. So when I say advertising, don't think I'm talking about radio ads or I'm talking about TV ads where they're just kind of these nameless 30-second generic commercials, right? So first of all, you got to consider if you want ads at all. You may be the type of person, I started out this way where I just didn't want any ads. I just wanted it to be very clean. However, I started realizing that I did want to do ads, not necessarily for the revenue, though I do get a small kickback when somebody signs up, but more of I used it kind of as a segment of the show to tell people about something that I found genuinely useful. So most of the time, this is with a particular product or service that I'm currently using myself, and so I tell people about how I'm using it. What I do not recommend for an ad is what I alluded to previously, is I would not just take a 30-second clip from somebody else, stick it into your podcast, and then call it a day. I think that those feel very inorganic, and I think those are the type of things that people are going to skip, because most podcast players have got that 30-second skip. They're just going to skip that. In fact, almost every podcast that has that type of ad, 100% of the time, I will skip that ad. But if it's you reading it and if it's you actually tying it into the podcast itself, A, it produces real value for the person who is listening to it, and B, for the advertiser, it's actually much more valuable because it's something that's going to convert much higher than just, say, sticking in a Snickers ad. So that said, if you're going to include advertising, I would definitely recommend making sure that it's just kind of a part of the show. So in addition to advertising or talking about products or services I use from other people, I also use it as an opportunity. Sometimes in that slot, I will also include something free that I'm doing as a part of Rightly & Company or Notable Themes. So I've got a theme over at Notable Themes called Headline, and I tell people all about it, how they can set up their own WordPress website really affordable. And so I say, head on over to notablethemes.com/headline and that sort of thing. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be a product that you're promoting. It could even be, you could use it as an opportunity to highlight your free email course or your free lead magnet or whatever it is that you want to use as a call to action to actually help people either purchase something that you get a commission from or to just sign up for your email list, which either way, it's going to be valuable for you as the podcaster and for the listener. Okay, so now that we've gone through some of those preliminary tips, let's go ahead and hop in here and I'm going to show you some of the processes that I take in order to record as well as to edit a podcast episode. Okay, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is one of my show maps. And again, this is going to be something highly recommended that you do, or at least something similar. And like you said, even if you don't already have one, that's totally fine. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave a PDF of this. So I'm just going to drag this right now, actually, while we are doing the show. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to provide this to you so you can actually go through and you can actually see some of the examples as I have them in my show map. So feel free to use this as your own kind of template or just one that you could use as a basis for kind of starting your own. Okay, so in here what I've got is I always type out a nice intro. So I'm going to have the introduction of all the different, so let's see, let's pop this open. It'll pop open the PDF, that'd probably be easier. So I've got the nice intro, and this is going to be what I actually put into my website for the actual introduction, and it's also going to show up for the post in social media. Then what I'll typically do is I will pick a thumbnail image. You can do that from something like pexels.com. I use Adobe Stock for my image. And then we go down into segment 1. And the format I use is essentially checkboxes. And I don't anymore, but I used to actually go through and check these off as I was talking. And again, I'm using an app called Bear, which I've done a ton of videos on. So just search Bear in the Rightly.tv YouTube page. Or you can do that at Rightly.co as well. You can search Bear. But I just go through and I just kind of create an outline. I just bulleted a list of things that I want to talk about, and then right here, let's go ahead and do presentation assistant. There we go. So then what I do right here is this is where I list out the specific sponsor that I'm going to be talking about. And then I go through, and this is segment 2, and then in similar fashion, I just go through here and I'm just creating an outline. I create like a high level thought, and then I break it down into indented if I want to break down into that. And it just kind of keeps my thoughts and everything very organized and on track, and I don't have to worry about, going off on weird tangents, and, it always kind of helps keep me on track so that the episode is staying focused. Then towards the end, I've got a little note here so that I always remember to tell people that they can record a question over at rightly.show/questions. And then right here, it's blank, but I typically list out any links or resources that are going to be useful, and then I add those to the show notes, which show up on the actual website. Then I've got a little checklist that I go through, which we're going to be actually going through most of these here in this video. But if there's some things that just in case I'm going to forget those, I make sure that I go through and I get those up to date here. So creating the show notes, recording and mastering the episode, uploading the file, which we're going to be getting into some of that, or going through Auphonic, which we're going to be talking about in this episode, uploading to B2, and finalizing the WordPress post, creating a short link, and writing and scheduling an email. So these are things that I would go through in order to actually produce an episode. Now, in terms of actually recording the episode, let's go ahead and talk through a little bit some of the software options that you have available to you. So I actually use 2 different pieces of software just because I got kind of a weird setup, and it's just something that's just become the norm for me, but you don't have to do it this way. I use a specific piece of software to record, and then use a second piece of software to actually master my final episode. So for recording, I actually use an app called ScreenFlow, and I can't show it to you right now because I'm actually using it to record this mic. However, ScreenFlow is something that's what I use to do all of my video tutorials, and so again, that's what you've been seeing my desktop with, so you can that's where I do a lot of my video and audio tutorials. Then what I do is, after I have actually recorded it, and don't think that you have to use something like ScreenFlow, because just using ScreenFlow to record audio is a little bit overkill. If you're on a Mac, you can use QuickTime, which is totally free. You just need some sort of device, and in fact, you can actually use apps on your iPad if you have an iPad as well, which you can use to record. You just need something that's going to record that audio, and that's going to connect to your really nice mic in order to capture that. Now, in order to do all of my mastering, like I said, I use GarageBand on a Mac, and again, you don't even necessarily need another app to capture that audio if you don't want. You can actually record directly into GarageBand, and that'll work just fine. You just want to make sure that you have some sort of software to actually capture and record that audio. Okay, so just as a quick example, here is QuickTime Player. So I'm just going to open up QuickTime, and then what we get to do is just go to New, Audio Recording. And then from the drop down here, you just want to make sure that you select your microphone. So for me, it's going to be USB audio codec. And then I'm just going to go ahead, and you'll see my audio levels right there as I'm talking. I'm just going to click record, and there we go. Right now I am actually recording out this particular episode, and then once you're done, you just click stop, and there you go. You've got your file. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and there you go. Okay, so now I've got one of my GarageBand projects up, just so I can give you a little bit of an overview of kind of how I lay out my episodes, so you can kind of see it visually. So I'm not going to get into all the details of how to do this. GarageBand is free, fortunately, if you're using a Mac. However, there are a lot of different options out there. You don't necessarily have to be using GarageBand. You can use Audacity, which I think is free for either Mac or PC. You can also use something like Audition if you want as well. So what I've got here, and what I'll do is, if you want to check out kind of how this episode actually sounds, because I wish I could play it for you right now, but the driver isn't quite working as it's supposed to. But what you can do is you can head on over to rightly.show/90, and you can actually listen to this episode. So what I've got here is kind of a very quiet a music track that plays underneath, and then my intro. So what it is I tell people what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, and then it breaks into a voiceover and a louder version of music. And this voiceover essentially kind of is somebody I actually hired over on Fiverr, which we'll be talking about here in a moment. Then the rest of the music intro, and then I say welcome to the show, and then I start the show right here. Then of course, like I talked about earlier, I've kind of got that mid-roll ad. So right in this section right here is when I'm talking about the ad. And then right in here, I've actually got another voiceover, which has some music in the background that then people use. So don't think you have to use something quite this kind of complex. You can use something very simple as in terms of like music that you just fade in. So within a GarageBand, if you're using this little part right here, this little tab button right here, you can actually go in here and you can edit this how loud the sound is, the music is, for fading that in, fading it out, and all those pieces. So all you really need to do is start out with some music, fade it out into your voice, and you're probably good. You don't even have to add in like pre-rolls. Like this again is kind of a voiceover, but you don't need anything that sophisticated. You could literally in between segments just find a really short song and then put that in there instead. So what I do for my music when I was originally putting together my podcast template is I went to a place called audiojungle.net. They've got some really affordable music that you can use. It's royalty free, so you can go in here and they've got logos and indents. So if you're just looking for something very short, you can go through and you can actually begin to browse those of whatever type of music you like. You can also go into music packs. So if you want to go through some of the corporate ones, you can do that. But they've got so many different types of music, and then you can listen to the style and everything in between. But I'd recommend doing some sort of really basic music intro and music outro. It just adds a little bit of extra kind of flair and style to your podcast episode. The other thing I'd recommend if you want some sort of professional voiceover is that you can go to a place called Fiverr.com, and then all you got to do is just find this section where they've got audio. So if we go to, this is actually a person I've used in the past, but if you go in and you go to music and audio, you can find people specifically who do voiceover, and you can even find people who do podcast editing if you want to. Just find somebody who's going to do a nice voiceover for you. You can listen to a lot of their samples, just type out exactly what you want them to say. Again, it's a nice little added flair to your podcast episode to help it really work. Okay, and one of the things I did mention is that you can head on over to rightly.show/90 if you'd like to listen to it. However, just for an example, right now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play for you just the intro of one of my podcast episodes so you can kind of get an idea or a feel for how I decided to work in mine. So pretty much every single one of us has some sort of online membership. Most of them makes our lives easier in the realms of business, productivity, and even entertainment. But why is it that pretty much every single one of the subscription services out there are dishonest in their pricing? We're going to talk about all this and more on The Rightly Show.
It's the program that helps you start and grow a brand-centric online business through the fusion of form and function.
This is The Rightly Show.
Hello and welcome to the program. My name is Thomas McGee and this is The Rightly Show. Okay, so once you've completed your episode, you've got it all edited right here within GarageBand or whatever software you're using, then you're going to want to make sure that you export this. And so what I do is within GarageBand, I go up to Share, and then I go Export Song to Disk. And then once that's done loading, I make sure that I select MP3, and I just do a bit rate of 192. So I just want to make sure that's at a high quality. You don't necessarily have to do the highest quality, but a really high quality, and then I click export. Okay, so once I've exported my file, it's going to look something like this. So it's just going to be a nice little MP3 audio file. However, what I like to do is go through one extra step to ensure that it is going to be ready for as a podcast file. So in order to do that, I go to a website called auphonic.com. You can create a free account, and then they've got an upgradable feature that you can go to as well, which will enable you to upload more episodes. But let's go ahead and click on, we'll go ahead and click on one of the previous episodes that I had actually gone through and edited. Let's see if I can actually edit this. Yep, edit this production. There we go. And so the cool thing is that this is actually going to enable you to go through and add all the metadata to the MP3 file that you will need in order for it to actually be a real MP or a podcast episode. So the first thing that I want to do is up here in this section, I upload the actual file. This has already been uploaded, but this is where you're going to select the file that you exported from GarageBand or whatever specific software you're using. You're also going to then want to upload any podcast art. And the great thing is within Auphonic, they actually allow you to create a template. So a lot of this is already templated out. I just change out the title name, the track number, which is just the episode number. And then all this information here is already in there. So like this metadata, all this information is already stored within the template. So I always just kind of close it. Then what I do for the output file is I want it to be an MP3, 128 kbps, just to give it, I try to find a nice balance between the quality of the file and the sound and how big the file is going to be. Then I've got kind of this special nomenclature right here for the file itself. So I always do rightly show, so rs underscore, and then within 3 digits, I do the number of the episode. So that's what the file name is that's actually going to come out. Then they've got some extra things in here I don't really use for, speech recognition. You can have it published directly to like Dropbox or something. I don't do that. But then they've got this section, audio algorithms, which is pretty amazing, particularly if you are, working within a scenario when maybe there's a lot of highs and lows with your recording, or maybe your mic isn't quite set up as well as it should be. This can actually help quite a bit. So they've got this adaptive level that corrects levels and differences between, different people who are speaking if you've got multiple people. Then you've got the loudness normalization. So if you've got peaking, it helps soften that. If you've got parts that are too quiet, it helps boost that. And then right here, it can actually help specify the overall loudness of the entire file itself. So it's got a setting here specifically for podcasts and mobile. Then they've got some filtering. So like if you've got this, maybe you got a fridge like in the background, like mine literally just turned on as I was saying that. So that was pretty weird. But if you've got some sort of hum or something like that in the background, this is going to help filter that out. And this is going to do that to even a more degree right here with the noise and hum reduction. And it's going to seriously help you kind of polish your final file. Then you're just going to click Start Production, and there's going to be in the next screen, it's going to ask you to confirm that you want to start the production, so that because they only give you a limited amount of recorded file time that they allow you to do, so 2 hours for free, and then if you pay for it you get up to 10 hours. But it is an amazing tool for ensuring that the specific file has all the metadata and all the things necessary in order to be valid and recognized across all podcast platforms. Another tool that you might want to try out is one called SpeakPipe. So if I were to go over to rightly.show/question, there's actually a page that I've set up via SpeakPipe, which is a totally free tool where people can actually click to start recording, and then it will allow them to record a question or a comment that gets sent to you via email that you can then include in your podcast. So if you want listener questions, if you want listener feedback or stories or something like that you want people to be able to submit to you, SpeakPipe is a way that you can create a page just like this one and have people send you audio recordings that you can then plop right in to your podcast episode. Okay, so that's it. I know I didn't go through all the details I could have in terms of how to use something like GarageBand, and I did that purposefully because I just wanted to kind of give you the brief overview of some ways that you can go in there and actually record and master a podcast episode. So if you want to learn GarageBand specifically, or you want to learn something like Audacity or something else, I'd recommend going and finding some tutorials that'll dive deeper into how to use that specific piece of software. I knew because there's so much software out there, I just wanted to kind of give you the general idea and kind of workflow that I use currently so that you can pick and pull apart from what I'm doing and add it to your own workflow. If editing or mastering a podcast is way outside the sphere of what you want to do, like I said, there's something like Fiverr or Upwork, and there's a ton of services out there that you can use that will actually go through and will master and edit that podcast for you. Okay, so then up to this point, which you should have after you've gone through all the other videos, is your very first recorded podcast file. So what we're going to do in the next video is we're actually going to walk through step by step how to get that file actually published as a podcast. So I'm going to show you the basics and the beginnings of getting a WordPress website set up affordably, as well as the Blueberry podcast plugin that is totally free for WordPress, as well as how to host that file that we've created, and then how to submit your podcast once you've actually got it out there on the web to ensure that it's distributed to places like Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you want your podcast to be distributed. So as always, if you found this video useful, hit that like button, subscribe if you're not already, and make sure to hit that bell notification so that you get notified the moment that next video comes out. And until next time, go out there and create a brand that is truly remarkable. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to watch this episode of Rightly TV. Be sure to click on one of the other episodes on this page. Plus, head on over to rightly.co, where you'll be able to create a free account, which will give you access to all the videos, the podcast, articles, downloads, and more. Again, head on over to rightly.co, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.